But boy, the minute I got to sit in the back seat, it's over. I can't, 50 feet down the road and I'm sick.
No, no, it's very hard. That motion sickness is very hard when as and if you're not driving, of course, if you're driving, you shouldn't be reading. But if
Yeah.
but that motion sickness gets you crazy
I
going,
was,
and
I avoided cruises for like forever because I was so afraid of motion sickness. And, when my wife got me to go on that first cruise, I was like totally dumbfounded that I basically went through the whole cruise and didn't even remotely felt motion sickness. And since
yeah,
then, we've been on a handful of them, and one day it was a little bit rough. And if you get to the outer end, either the way the front or in the back or out on the outside, you're going to feel this a little bit. But if you go to the center of the boat and you go down low where the atrium is, where the bar and everything is, that's where the apex of everything moves from, and you don't feel it. And it's
right.
really amazing. You feel it in your room out on the end, but you don't feel it in the middle of the boat.
It's pretty well. It's a huge boat. I
Oh,
wish David could comment on about what I'm about to say. But did you hear about this guy, the kid that fell overboard at the Disney cruise? The father
no,
jumps off the boat, and they actually turn the boat around, and
really?
they drop a launch craft, and they actually saved the kid and their father. I guess there was enough people that watched the guy jump off of the boat to save his daughter. Well, that was
Wow.
impressive.
It's
You know,
amazing that the child survived the fall.
That's a long ways. Yeah, those cruise ships from the deck, one of the decks down to the water, it's got to be 50 or 60 feet. Anyway,
yeah. I mean, it can imagine what it would be if his dog jumped over. I mean, it's like, whoa, a kid jumping over. That was pretty impressive that he did it.
okay, so here's the
Most people
question.
would wait for their pet.
Did the kid
But
jump or did they throw the kid over? That's the
yeah. Well, they don't know how the kid got over because
uh,
basically this plexiglass, it's very high.
yeah,
It would be too high for the kid to there's no holes in the plexiglass. So they haven't figured it out yet. Or if they have, they're not talking about it.
they're probably not talking about it.
So David, just by shaking your head if you're listening to us, did you hear about this story? And did I present it correctly?
David, did you throw the kid overboard?
Well, he can't answer.
So
He can't answer for
anybody who's
himself.
ever
So anybody who's listening, by the way,
anybody
hey,
who's ever
welcome
had
to
a
Thinking Out
toddler
Loud with Friends. Yeah, go ahead. Get me.
That's
anybody
funny.
who's ever had a toddler that's made it to the top of the refrigerator to get the cookies knows that some little glass thing partition on a deck is not going to
It's nothing.
deter them if they're determined enough.
And from my understand, I don't have any kids, but I hear you can't if you turn around, they're gone.
You know what? When my
And they
daughter
they
when my
do whatever
daughter
it is.
came to visit and she brought her almost like maybe 1.5-year old at the time, Annie and I went through and with my handy guy and we kid proofed the house and we put these trick ass things in the kitchen cupboards and on the drawers and all this stuff. And it took my daughter's kid maybe 10 minutes in the kitchen to figure it all out. She was in the, but she was really well behaved. I mean, she didn't get into anything, but she was like, oh, this doesn't work so good. Let me figure this out. Boom, she pulls it out. It didn't take her long.
No, kids are intuitive. Kids are smart. Kids are intuitive. Kids are creative. It's, as you get older, as a society, we try to dumb you down as quickly as possible. Like I love looking at little kids and they just, in a big crowd, they'll just be singing and dancing, whatever, making faces, having fun until, the parent says to them, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't
Don't
do
do
that,
that.
you
Yeah,
know?
don't do that.
You know. And speaking of which, hey, welcome to Thinking Out Loud with Friends. 266 today, straight consecutive episodes. And so thanks. Remember, everything you hear today is an opinion. And there'll be a lot of opinions today. I have a feeling.
So you've
So
been back in Vegas a week or so now, and then you got a couple weeks to go. Where are you going to go? You going to take her around and show her the Earth?
Well, I
on
came
this
here
side
for
of the
a
world?
specific purpose. I didn't just come here for the fun of coming here. I came here for a few different reasons. Number one, I needed to meet with a lawyer for various family reasons. Number two, I was contemplating on selling my home. And number three, I wanted to go see my normal doctor because I have Medicare and I wanted to use it, because in Thailand, you can't use Medicare. So
Oh,
I thought I would, do a few things and then we're going to do a little bit of traveling, but not much. Just the jet lag this time coming from east to west was overwhelming to me this time around.
really?
And normally it's not as bad as it is, but this time going east to west, west to east, not so bad, not so bad. So basically that's the story, and we're sticking to it.
You gain a
Having a
day
good
on the
time.
going west to east, so that's why.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of throws me
Yeah,
every time.
yeah, you gain a day. So we left at 9 o'clock. And we arrived at 9 o'clock the same day, However, it was basically 2 days, a day and a half by the time we arrived, but it was still the same time we left.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. I flew a direct flight from Bangkok to where was it? It was LA direct. And
Are you sure?
no,
Okay,
that's
there
how
you go.
bad it messed
That's
me.
good.
No,
Well,
when
let
I
me tell
arrived
you where
in
you flew,
LA,
because
I
I
arrived
was,
in LA an hour and a half before I left, but 26 hours later.
That's
well,
pretty
that sounds
wild.
like a Monty Python bit,
It does.
I
It
ate a
does.
half hour before I went to sleep, and
Yeah,
and then I ate again after I woke up. I don't know,
yeah,
but anyway. So Del Monte. Speaking of eating, Del Monte. Can anybody in the room sing the theme song from Del Monte?
Del Monte like pineapples?
Del
The
Monte, the canned vegetable king.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
no, I could
they just filed bankruptcy.
no, really?
Yeah, today they filed bankruptcy. 138-year-old company, and today they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. So good luck, Del Monte. Good luck. I mean, I don't know how
Man.
many people eat canned foods today, considering the opportunity for fresh frozen and fresh foods, but canned food. You know,
Well,
I think they
we
were
keep
one
some
of the
green
leaders.
beans on the shelf just for
Yeah, we do
quick
too.
meals.
We have a
You know,
certain amount of canned foods that are in the pantry for that one day when things don't work anymore for a while.
good
Yeah,
for
that's right.
hurricanes as long as you have a manual can opener.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have electric.
Yeah, either that or sharp teeth. One of the two. Uh, So basically, let's see, what do I wanted to say here? She's arguably the biggest pop star in music today with summer anthems like Espresso and Man Child. Sabrina Carpenter. Pretty amazing what she's done. I don't know if you heard about this, but she started a nonprofit and donating $1 from every ticket she sold. And in less than a year, she has raised over $1 million for charity.
Mm.
Is that not amazing?
I've never even heard of her.
Sabrina Carpenter? Yeah, she was one of those.
Yeah.
She was a
Did
Disney
not
star,
lose
just
anything.
Oh,
like Miley.
really? Is she a relative of the Carpenters? Carpenters, the originals?
No, no,
No,
Bruce.
I don't
Before
know. You
your
know,
age. I'm
I
older than you are, I think, and I know who Sabrina Carpenter is.
yeah, I don't know. I don't keep up with any of that.
She was on the Saturday Night Live, as a matter of the 50th special as well. She's pretty talented. I think, I'm not sure Olivia Rodrigo finds her very, very attractive, because it sounds to me like one of them stole the other style. It's like almost like, Paul Reiser and Richard Lewis. They don't get along very well, or they didn't when Richard was alive.
Hmm.
But I believe that Sabrina, if you listen to Sabrina and Olivia, you could hear the similarities in their song. Greg, what do you think? You're an
Yeah,
avid music listener.
yeah, it's
Oh,
similar, but as to who stole whose style, I don't know about that.
Now,
You know,
I think
yeah,
everybody
nobody
steals
owns the
everybody's.
style. Whoever has the
yeah,
better songwriters and you know that have the better performance. Period. You know.
yeah, yeah.
That's
I mean,
exactly
is
what
that
it
why you
is.
have the Sabrina? That's why you have the Sabrina Carpenter poster up in your living room? Is that what it is? Yeah, is that it?
Nope.
It's actually taped to a ceiling over his bed.
No.
Greg has a
Well,
very
now
valid
we're getting
point.
somewhere.
Greg has a very valid point. It's actually about who has the best songwriters. And if you actually look up Sabrina Carpenter's songs and who is the songwriter, you're gonna have a long list of very
Mhm.
well-known names.
Yep.
And she does not own the songs. She's just a machine producing money, which is unfortunate. But that's what it is.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I
Well,
don't
Well,
know.
there's a
money,
lot of
That makes
money
artists
me
makes the
like
world
that.
go round.
Go
that
ahead,
makes
Blaine.
me think of the comparison of the lyrics of a Beyonce song and the Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven that used to go around, where they said, you know, Led Zeppelin, one songwriter, and Beyonce had 12 songwriters or something like that. And the lyrics are just, you know, awful, as most pop music is. So,
Boys,
although a well-crafted, you know, I can always appreciate a well-crafted pop tune, regardless of, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, Boyce and Hart used to write the songs for the Archies, which is, you know, back in the day.
Even the
And
songs that Neil Diamond did for the Monkees were still good, you know? And I used to
Are
think the
you
Monkees were a total joke because they were, but
are
you know.
you ready for this? This if I watched Becoming Led Zeppelin, the documentary, and I found out that Jimmy Page was the lead guitar player on Goldfinger. And he wrote the guitar riff for that famous Goldfinger movie. Alfie, he did all of Lulu's work, or I mean stuff you wouldn't believe what these guys did before they became Led Zeppelin.
they're
yeah,
I didn't
great
I
know
saw that
this.
musicians.
was a very good documentary. I mean, you want to, I read Steve Lukather's book a couple of years ago. You look at the back, there's like, I don't know, 1,500 album credits that guy played on.
Yeah.
Man,
Him and the rest of the Toto guys, they played on
the
so
Toto
many
guys play
records.
on so much, yeah. Yeah.
It was crazy.
It's like the Earth, Wind,
Almost
and
as
Fire
much as the
horns.
Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, the Earth, Wind,
Almost as
and
much as
Fire
the
horns
Wrecking
do
Crew.
too.
Yeah.
You
Hey,
know.
Bruce, I have a
By the way,
question for you. Why does your background make you look so like you're in the cloud that the spaceship is going through?
It looks to me like he has Mickey Mouse ears on.
Well, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Well,
You're very fuzzy.
if I sat closer, then the light would be better. But when I sit back, the light's kind of
Yeah.
squirrely.
That's why I refuse to use those backdrops, because I think they all look
Well,
like
you know,
shit.
I
I don't know
find
what's,
it
I don't know
very
what's
You
behind
can just
you.
look
interesting.
into my closet. There's my closet
There's your
in the Oval
closet. Hey,
Office.
should shut the door and hang something up
I
there.
find it very, very interesting to see people's real background. I love watching those TikTok videos because these people will do it in their bedroom. They will do it in their living room. They will do it, and I love watching the lifestyle that they have, as they develop their TikTok videos or their
That's not
Instagram
TikTok you're
videos.
watching, Jan.
Yeah, Chad, don't even, Chad, you can't fool us one bit.
Ah,
Oh,
Has
look
no,
at,
I
anybody
can't.
seen the
he's
F1
gonna
movie
shut his
this
door
week?
because now we got to him.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, it's the becoming Led Zeppelin. They stopped it before they got to their I guess the biggest song of all time that they did was Stairway to Heaven. You know, but I was impressed the way they did it and how they started and how you would think that they had a bigger following in the beginning than they did, but they did stick with it. And they really grew. They grew and grew and grew from
Yeah.
performing live.
I mean, back in those days, for the most part, you had to be good, because
Yes.
the record companies were putting up so much money and blah, 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 blah. And it tended to weed out. So there was way less manufactured
Right.
artists, I think, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s than there are. I mean, there's always been that there, I mentioned the Archies and, there was other,
The Monkees.
all the, like Bobby Sherman just passed away, and Bobby Sherman, but he was talented. I mean, he had some good songwriters too. He had some hits.
But
And
the bottom
Well,
line
I
is you
heard.
had to, as musicians, you had to be good in order to get the record deal, in order to get into the studio for the majority of it. That's the way.
yeah,
That was the model of the record industry. Now that's
Well,
totally flipped. Now you just got to have a good song that's put
yeah.
together in the studio. And I've done gigs where this guy was a runner up on American Idol, and it was the first time he ever did a live gig.
yeah,
And he didn't have a band together. Yeah, I mean it was a disaster. People were throwing things at the stage. And this poor guy was off stage, was in tears, and I just said, dude, people want to see a band.
yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, I used to do this ASCAP songwriting conference, and one time we had in for an hour and a half, the producer, Dr. Luke. And Dr. Luke did a bunch of Katy Perry stuff and Kesha, and had a big lawsuit with Kesha. And in a 5-year period, at one point, he had like 23 #1 hits. And so he brought in his computer, and they showed it up on the screen, and they put up the Pro Tools files, and they were talking about a couple of tunes. The one that I remember the most was the song Extraterrestrial by Katy Perry, which starts off with this killer drum thing. And he was going through the 4 or 5 different samples that were combined to make that kick drum sound at the beginning of that song. And the way he was talking about the way they put this stuff together, it was almost 180 degrees counterintuitive to when I used to hang out with bands and listen to them write songs and go through stuff. It's these guys are starting with the beat or the loop or the sample and then creating a song out of that, instead of coming up with a song idea and then pushing that around
Write
to
some
get
words and then a
the
tune.
verse and the chorus. Yeah, to me, it
Yeah.
was like completely 180 of the way that, to me, actual musicians and band people write songs. Now, the end result was, that's a great tune. And Katy Perry had some very good, well-crafted pop hits, but the way that they write them is completely different than anything that I had been, the way that I had always thought about songwriting. It's very interesting in that regard.
Yeah, the interesting thing about like when you think about the Beatles, if you saw that documentary on the Beatles that was on Disney, they would go in with an idea of a riff or a melody line without lyrics, and then they would just sing anything, to the when George Harrison was writing something, he didn't have it all together, and John Lennon said, just sing cauliflower, until you come up with the right words that you want to use. And then I guess the more famous one is Get Back, where they started out with JoJo Johnson. He was somewhere from Phoenix, Arizona, and that, then it ended, of course, JoJo was a man, and from Tucson, Arizona, and, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, but Greg, you said something about the musicians and the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, but the reality is the Wrecking Crew was there, and even on the Beach Boys record, they pulled the Beach Boys off, they pulled the Monkees off, and they used the Wrecking Crew to do the basic tracks. But when
Yeah.
they toured, the band toured using their own musicianship. But the studio, they went in with the Wrecking Crew.
Right.
You
But
know,
before you get to the studio, in other words, at that time it was really, really hard to get a record deal. I mean, they were giving them away. Well, after a while they were, but I mean, that was the big thing. I know bands who would play for, I mean, REO Speedway, it's a perfect example. They were literally a weekend band in Columbus, Ohio, playing for people drinking 3-2 beer on Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights for years, you know.
It's like we did a couple of shows with Head East, and they were the same thing.
Yep.
They were huge in the Midwest because they played constantly. They were hauling their gear in a semi, and nobody outside of the Midwest hardly even knew who they were until Flat as a Pancake and the One Good Reason, you know.
Same
well,
thing with
all
guys
bands
like
did
Ted
it that way,
Winfrey.
Greg. They all started off by they had to build up a local following.
Yeah.
Even when I was signing bands, I was looking for bands with local followings.
Yeah.
It's like for example, the Knack. My Sharona. When I would go see these guys, it was like standing room only wherever they played. And I never thought My Sharona was like going to be the biggest hit in the world, but people loved it. People when they played it, people went insane in that room, and I saw it with my own two eyes. And I tried to sign these guys. Now Doug was a friend of mine, but I felt at the end that we didn't have the record label I was with couldn't have given him the support that Capitol Records was giving him at the time, and I felt that hey, you got to go with Capitol. But
But
they did the right thing.
to this point too, I know you want to get in, Wayne. Touring at those years lost money.
Yeah, touring supported the album. Now the album's it's the other way around now.
Yeah,
now the merchandise supports
and the merchandise.
Merchandise and touring, pays for the album and and pays for the loss that they take when putting it out to streaming.
Yeah, they don't make money by selling an album anymore. It's really sad.
I mean, come on, $1 billion tours.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And publishing is not as big as it used to be. I mean, when I was working in the industry, I saw many a band break up because of the publishing, the disparity in or the difference in the amount of money that each band member was making, thanks to the publishing. The guys that were writing the songs were getting super wealthy compared to the guys that were just playing in the band.
Yeah. Well, I mean, publishing's obviously going to take a hit if the end place where they get sold, where the publishing money comes from, is Spotify, where it's 0.00002 cents per play. It's.
But it also comes back to, and this was illustrated by perfectly by Taylor Swift. Who owns your masters? Whenever you do that first album or that first whatever. If you don't own those tapes, it doesn't matter whether you own the rights to the songs. You wrote the song. If you don't have those tapes, whoever.
Look at Creedence. What happened to him?
Yeah.
That I mean, he couldn't even play his own songs.
Oh, yeah, that was criminal, and he eventually won that case, but it took forever.
Yep.
That was also
he played at Milken last year. He actually, he's getting old, like we all are. And I was surprised.
Really?
He did a pretty good job. Yeah.
Well, if he's still alive, he's still playing. That's all there is to it. And by the way, R.I.P. Mick Ralphs, from Bad Company, Mata Hoople, he passed this last week.
Yeah. Every time I listen to Bad Company, I still have all the power chords. And to me, though, the thing about Bad Company that always just killed me was the Boz Burrell bass lines, man. They're just some of the best, most simple, spot-on bass lines ever, man. I just love that shit.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you something. I never realized how crucial John Paul Jones was. I think that's his name, right? John Paul Jones for Led Zeppelin. I mean, I can't believe how influential he was in the creating of the music. How he would work with John Bonham, so that he would say that he would leave notes out to supplement the kick drum.
Do you
Who
know
would
that
have thought of that?
Neil Peart wrote most of the words to a lot of their songs? A lot of the Rush songs started with Neil Peart's, writing all the words to the song, and then they'd get together in the studio and craft a song around Neil's words. I always thought that was pretty interesting. That's kind of a interesting way to do it. But wow, a drummer writing all the words to the songs. That's just kind of cool.
Well, hey, it's. I think still that the song is everything. I think the song is what you need. If the song is no good, I don't care how good a performance you put on it,
Yeah.
it's not going to carry. So the song has to be. And if you think about the song, Ed Sheeran, when he was sued, he went into court and said almost every song is four chords. He could play almost any song with just four chords.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, a lot of these, DJs that are actually pretty good. You hear a lot of these mashups will they layer two or three songs over the top of each other, and they'll be damn near the same. Just cracks me up. I mean, they're kind of fun to listen to, but because it's a different twist on some old tunes, but still,
I always love
you think about it.
The old Frank Beard quote from ZZ Top, where he said, "I only know 3 beats, but I know I'm really good."
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Speaking
funny.
speaking about the
You know,
DJs, I have a funny story when I used to work for this first music venue in San Diego, and we had a DJ performance that night. He finished. He came down to the monitor engineer, and I was with him, and he said, "Which way is the green room, gentlemen?" And my buddy said, "Green room is the third floor, but that's for the artists."
Well,
yeah, I agree with you on that, man. I have to tell you that it's very difficult. I mean, in the very beginning, it was very difficult to think of a DJ as a player in any way, shape, or form.
well, I
Very,
still
very
don't.
difficult.
Most of them are not. They're just idiots. But the
And
good
they're
ones, the
they're
good ones
making
are
a living
really
off of
good.
other people's music.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have such mixed emotions about DJs, but
Yeah. Me too. It's
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 like
a
that.
true test of your limiters. That's what
you know,
DJs.
that's for sure.
It's like the meme where Kanye West is sitting there in front of a console and goes, "I make my own beats," and then there's a picture of Neil Peart going, "Yeah, right."
Yeah. Hey, speaking of those, Diddy got off, man. He beat the racketeering charges.
I can't even believe it. I can't even believe it.
But he's still going away. I mean, they got
Yeah.
him on a few different,
And
they got him on
he didn't get
prostitution
bail,
charges.
so I mean, the guy. I don't know. I have my own personal opinions. Do
Yeah,
your own
I
research.
wasn't there, but I know enough to have an opinion, I suppose. But I wasn't there, so it's hard to judge why people do the things that they do. But
Well, the only benefit I see is that now they have baby oil back in the stores.
yeah,
So there you go. Now you can find baby oil again. For
So
those.
I have a question then for the assembled masses here. What would the 60s and 70s had been like if the Me Too movement existed for touring acts of the 60s and 70s?
oh my.
I would be in jail.
Yeah, most of us would be, I'm sure.
That's
Yeah, I
all there
mean,
is to it.
Oh my.
I mean, that-
no, the whole industry has changed, and I'm not saying it's changed for the better or for the worse, but I kind of feel like my days in that industry, we would all be sharing the same cell. Let's put it that way. But the reality is that it wasn't that time. There wasn't that way at that time, and I don't believe that I did anything wrong. Looking back at it, and based on who I was as a person. But I didn't do things like Harvey Weinstein, where
Yes.
demanding, putting somebody's career on the line, or Bill Cosby, drugging them up and then, and raping them while they weren't conscious. I never did anything like that,
it was a
Yeah.
person's choice to get on the bus. That's all you
Get
have
on,
to say.
get on the bus.
Yeah, don't make a fuss. Just get on the bus. That's Frank
Yeah,
Zappa
well,
was
once you got
right.
on the bus, there was a dangerous place for you to be if it was the persuasion that they were looking for in the band, I mean, and then some people just, they just wanted to make how should we put it in a nice way, have sex with the star, It was
Yeah.
they
Sweet,
were
sweet
called
Connie.
groupies. They were called groupies. You know, they were called
Hmm.
groupies. That's what they were. You know, I mean,
I
a
never heard
guy
that
like,
term.
oh, you never did. Well, you got to talk to Sebastian Bach. He'll tell you
I
what
know
they
Wayne
are.
did. Did
He'll do
Maynard
the
have
definitions.
groupies?
Well, that wouldn't be the prime example of groupiedom.
I'm just kidding.
High school jazzers were kind of off limits.
Yeah. It was a good time had by all in those days. Everybody, I don't know anybody's the worse for the wear. And I think that if I think the challenge is that it's people want to take advantage of the famous people because they feel that America has become so litigious in so many different ways. Look at the doctors. I mean, for example, the doctor's insurance is so high right now, so high.
Yeah, and nurses
I
too.
just I just saw a house. You know what I'm talking about, Dr. House. And what they did is they in this episode the oncologist diagnosed the patient where he thought he had a certain kind of cancer. But after they did numerous tests and whatever, and they told the guy that, hey, you don't have that cancer and you're going to live. And when they told him that, the guy was really depressed. And what happened was is that when he found out that thought he was going to die, he sold his house. He put his house up for sale, and he did all of these things that people would do. Started spending money like crazy, and now he's going to live, and now he has to pay the consequences of what the diagnosis was that he was going to die. So he's suing the doctor for him.
It's like what was that movie Armageddon? To where one of the characters goes out and takes $1 million loan from a loan shark, and he said, I'll pay you back next Tuesday. Well, he was going up in the shuttle, and he was for sure he was going to die on this asteroid, doing all this stuff. Well, he ends up living.
Yeah, they come back.
yeah. He's one of the guys that came back, and he
I
has a great
remember.
line. He says, "Yeah, yeah, I may be a national hero, but I also got three 300-pound guys with guns waiting for me to cough up $3 million for them." So.
Well, today, if you can get your 5 minutes of fame, you should be able to get enough money to support that 5 minutes of fame and style. I mean, so that, fame and fortune come together these days. I don't really know of any person who's super famous that is super poor. At least they didn't have an opportunity to make some money. I mean, but most people, they do have that opportunity, and then a lot of people just piss it away. They just piss it away because they think that they think they're going to be making more money, and or they make them bad investments, or their manager steals it from them, or whatever. But for the most part, if you have some fame, you're going to be able to make some fortune.
You promised me I'll be famous when I join this group, and what now? It's been a few weeks now. Come on.
Yeah. Well, you are famous. You're getting a lot of hits, babe. You're getting a lot of hits.
Where's the money at the end of this rainbow, huh?
Yeah, I know the men in the bathhouse seem to really like you. I have to tell you.
Let's not go there.
Oh,
Yikes.
that would be a horrible
I'm gonna
thing to
remember.
think that
I'm
that's
gonna
where they're
remember the
streaming the show.
hostess. I'm gonna remember
Yeah.
the hostess instead. She was very nice.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, speaking of which, what do you think about the F1 movie? The F1 movie is out right
I
now.
saw it. I enjoyed it very much. It's fast.
I loved it. I saw it twice.
Yeah, I didn't see it
All
twice,
right,
but
I'm
I
gonna go
enjoyed
see it tomorrow.
And you know what? They made a movie out of the F1 race in Las Vegas, and it's due out too. It's a documentary.
Well,
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
This movie, the F1 movie, you got to see it in an IMAX, except no substitute.
Well, they made a lot of money on this movie from just endorsements. I have, you see the still shots of Brad Pitt, and these Formula One drivers. Normally, they've got advertisement all over their jumpsuit like crazy, and in this case, to make that movie, they really, really capitalized on these companies. That are going to be get dominance in the movie for seeing their name on Brad Pitt's jumpsuit.
I don't want to spoil it for you, Jan, but I'll just say Porsche had a very large in the first 15 minutes of the movie. Porsche had a very large endorsement, and they basically said whatever you need. So.
Well, you know that each car now, I don't know if you know this, but the difference between this and all the other races is every car is unique to the manufacturer. Who's ever designed and built the car, it's unique. It's not the same engine and chassis on every car with a different covering. It's built from the ground up. Everything is completely unique on these cars.
The F1 cars are custom built, and the manufacturers are the engines for the most part. And with what's the other race? The not for
Indy.
Stock car racing. That
NASCAR.
They all have to fall. They have to be so much weight with so much horsepower and so many cylinders, and so they all have.
Well, Indy does the same thing.
Very strict, guidelines.
Yeah, and there are also guidelines.
I'm sure. Yeah, well, I'm sure F1's got its guidelines too, but those cars are way more custom. But when you say Maserati or whatever, I mean that's kind of the engines.
But they changed the rules now because some people were spending, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Now the maximum you could spend is $140 million on the car. And another thing
they put a limit on
another thing, and on the team, not on the car, $140 million on the team. And what I didn't know is that each team has 2 cars and 2 drivers.
Yep. And I'm sorry to change the subject, but the gamble's in the house. So I got to acknowledge the gamble EX is in the house.
Oh, very nice. I got to tell you, not between the food and the shows that he's doing, his Facebook page is like popping off the hook, man. It's really cool.
Yeah, we're down here in Bend. Number 38 got to play today.
Very nice.
All right, let's see the rack that goes with it that makes it all work right. There you go. That brings back some memories. Oh my goodness, isn't that beautiful?
Some nice stuff. A lot of nice outboard gear.
Yeah, it's a lot of nice stuff.
I just got a Lexicon 300 XL with a Lark and another M5000 and a PCM 81 and 91 that need to go into some of these jamball racks.
Nice.
Cool. Very
super nice. So you now have a criteria of mixing age because the kids coming up today couldn't possibly mix on that rig. So you have to have engineers that have got experience.
The systems guy for this tour is mixing the opener, and the headliner guy. This has happened several times. The headliner guy's like, "You need to mix on that console. Don't let them give you some M32 or something. You need to take this opportunity." And he's all over it. I had to talk him through it, but he's all over it.
Oh, that's great.
He's got the gamble grin.
Yeah, that's very cool. I can't believe how much the X and the M come into videos and stuff like that. It's like, man, you guys get a real job, Throw those things out.
The question is, do you think there is room for an analog board in today's market? I mean, if Jim Gamble said, "Hey, here's
should we build another one and sell it, right?"
Yeah. I think that there's room for a digitally controlled analog board, like the DCX, like everything else Jim ever did. He was 25 years ahead of everyone else. and people weren't ready for it when it came out. People weren't ready to mix on a laptop or a tablet. Now everybody mixes on a laptop or a tablet. So,
Well, they don't mix the show; they just do the sound check.
oh no, they mix the show.
I've seen a lot of people on the iPads. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even these, he's got a Quantum up here for the headliner. That's essentially a giant iPad and a computer. I mean,
Well, in that sense, yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
So,
to Jan's point, let's see. The Stones have analog desk. AC/DC has an analog desk out front.
yeah, the Dead still have it. The Stones still
Yeah.
have it. I mean, there's a lot of people using the actual desk. You could get market penetration with an analog, true all analog signal path, all analog processor, as far as dynamics and stuff, system like the DCX, but with a modern control surface.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you got the ABS. You got Chuck from the Chuck Answigers. I think that's how he pronounces his name. Yeah,
You're talking
yeah.
about
Well, I
APB
didn't pronounce it right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that was a nice console. It's not like this, but it was a nice console. But they just didn't. They were way too late to the market.
Well, I sold quite a few of his boards in a digital market.
Yeah, at the very beginning, sure. It's a great sounding console. Yeah. It's not like this or an XL4, but the Spectres were very nice.
Well, when you think about it, and I'm trying to look for it right now, whereas I need to go up to here with
I mean,
all
look at
my
the comparison.
notes.
This is not really significantly bigger than that. It's about the same.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea about saving the space and everything, that's a bunch of garbage. That's ship sailed years ago.
Yeah. I mean, maybe
when
if
you
it was
look at
when you had Europas.
Yeah. And also too, every digital desk mainline act has a processing rack just like yours that you have signal effects or effects and channel processing on this side, and then bus processing and drive on the other side. I don't care what desk you're using. They could be using Ravages, they could be using Digicos, they could be using S6Ls. They still have a Robert when he toured in stadiums had that. Gregory saw that.
Oh yeah, he's got the same thing. He's doing the same thing over there that I'm doing over here.
Yeah. Now
the
steer's different,
effects,
of course, but.
Yeah, I mean, this year at Infocom, basically, Allen and Heath launched the Q series. They have the Digico had the Quantum and the SD. Laowa had a flexible IP-based system that they were looking at for consoles. With that's I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. The Laowa, have you LAWO?
Yes.
Yeah, the YouTube studios have a bunch of Laos in their studios.
Right.
They're pretty tricky.
And then you got solid state logic, the SSL Live V6 or the L650 or the L350. These are all digital consoles, and then of course you got Waves. Now Waves came out with the digital console, but now they have the LV1, which is the fader board that goes with that.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Have you guys had a chance to play on that yet? No.
I played with it a while ago.
Jan, you skipped the new release of a SSL Oracle, the analog console with the full recall feature.
Well, I didn't skip it. They didn't announce it at Infocom. Yamaha demoed the DM7 there and the Ravage PM mixer.
I don't think that Oracle's made for live use, though. Maybe somebody will take it out.
That's a studio. But I would gladly see the live application of that. I would 100% be on board with the analog SSL that can do a full recall.
Yeah. I placed the link in the backstage lounge of all of this gear, and I don't think anybody looked at it and gave me any comments on it of what they thought about what's new and upcoming in the world of sound.
Is it in the chat on the Zoom?
Yeah, not in Zoom. It's on in Robert's group on the Backstage Lounge.
I don't have
I
Facebook.
social
posted a
media.
link there.
I do
You don't
not
have
have
social
Facebook.
media. Smart man. Smart man. I will tell you, it is a good thing not to have unless you like addictions. If you like addictions, these the analytics, they know who you are and what you like better than what you know who you like and what you are. And I'll tell you an interesting story. The other day, Bo showed me a purse that she wanted to buy. And then she tells me the next day, she says to me, I think Facebook is listening into our conversations.
She just figured that
And
out.
and then I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, look at my feed. And all it was were like pages and pages of purses. So
Yeah,
I don't know how they figured it out, but they did.
crazy. Uh,
What else? What
uh,
else? What else? What else? Who else has got something they want to say?
so you're
Hey,
growing up.
I actually have a Turing question, if I may. Can
We're
I?
listening.
Um,
Yes, of course.
what is the most subtle way? Let's say I have a scenario, I'm going on tour, doing front of house, and I am dealing with production manager who I am sensing he's learning the ropes, and I end up doing a lot of PMing as on my own time that I should be doing. Now, he comes from the trusted person, so I want to help a friend, but I also do want to get compensated with for what I'm doing because I am ending up doing a lot of advances, getting quotes for the rental gear, contacting the venues and seeing what kind of equipment do they have.
Why isn't
Uh,
he doing this?
huh?
Does he not know that he's supposed to do that?
He's just not that fast on his toes, and he's just from the two conversations that we've had together, I kind of sense that he's learning a lot from me, which is fine. And he's an enthusiastic and very lovely person, but I want to have a conversation about, hey, I'm ending up doing more work that I'm actually needing to do. And now that I know that I have to do it, I know it's necessary. How do I navigate a conversation about, hey, you have to convince your management to up the rate a little bit because I am actually doing your duties too. But he's still on the team, and I want him to be on the team, and he's probably going to collect all the accolades for our collective work, which I don't care for. It's fine. I want the tour to be successful in the first place. But how do I navigate this conversation?
Wow.
You don't. That would be my recommendation. You don't navigate the
Yeah, you
conversation
just
that
gotta
way.
chalk it up to won't let that happen again, but we're gonna
Experience.
make this good. Yeah, just watch
Because
out for it next time.
Yeah, if they want
the
to come back
first time,
for the next tour, then you go, look, this is what I did. I mean, I would keep the receipts, if you will.
Yeah, there's not much you can do at this point because anything you do or say is going to create waves that you really don't want to deal with.
Yeah,
right.
you're gonna look petty
Even
regardless.
if
Once
your
you
friend the
started
PM
doing,
doesn't have a problem with it, other people may.
right. Once you started doing the work for him, you created the situation for yourself. If you wouldn't have done it in the beginning, you would have said to him, "Hey, you need to take care of this." Then you wouldn't be in the position, but you didn't. You took it upon yourself to do it, and so now he's thinking that that's your job,
Yeah, unfortunately,
whether it's his job or not.
In Greg's position, if that guy doesn't do his job, it puts Greg in a really bad position, a number of different times because he's got to jump through hoops last minute to make things right, and he may not end up with the things that he needs to get it done. So you almost have to do what you're doing, Greg, but you shouldn't have to do it again.
Yeah,
And I don't,
yeah.
and to be fair and to be honest, I'm not saying that this person is not doing his job, but me being just proactive and wanting to show that I'm capable of presenting all the solutions for the control package, for the audio rentals and insurance. I just noticed like, oh, I'm actually, well, my production manager from my venue noticed like, hey, you actually doing production manager's job. Be careful not to overstep your role.
Yeah.
But I also notice it's kind of needed. Like we both learning from each other, you know.
How long is the
So
tour?
it's a 1 month leg as a supporting act for another artist.
I think you should just be glad it's not a 1 year.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
grin and bear it, and hopefully, you know, you guys can be friends afterwards. And if you work with him again, he'll take on more of a role. You'll have to have this conversation with him at that point in time. But at this point in time, I don't think there's anything you can do except
Okay.
just do what you know you need to do and look great doing it. Everybody will know. You may not get the credit for it, but you know what? Everybody will know.
And I don't care for credits as long as we know. And by 100%, Bruce, I will make it a good tour.
And the other
This
thing
is a
too is
guaranteed.
you know think about this too. If you're teaching this guy how to do his job, then you may want this guy. You may want to work with this guy a few more times because he's going to be the project manager that you love because you taught him how to do his damn job. You know, and
That's right.
the one thing great about some A2s and some other people when I go to other towns, you know, if I end up working with people that I kind of taught how to do their job or have worked with them before and had to steer them, you know, I end up loving those guys because they know what to expect, and I know what to expect, and we walk in there and we plow through it, and I hand out patch sheets, and everybody knows what to do, and we hit the ground running, you know. But when you got, you know, because you know, I find that, in Wayne, you too probably is, you know, I find that on any one given gig, and you know, Jan, you and I have had this conversation. I probably do a lot more ahead of time than most, you know, sound guys in my position do. And people are always amazed when I come in and, you know, I've touched all the drawings long before we get there. And, you know, I have patch sheets and I build the console file. You know, there's not one gig that I do that I start with it from scratch on a digital console. You know, I walk in the door and I got a thumb drive with the show on it and I load it and then I adapt it as we go. But I've always got a starting point because I have template files for each console. I have a monitor file and I have a band file and I have a corporate file for every console I use. So I got a starting point. But what I usually do, I do a paper tech, you know, on myself and figure out what I need to do the show, and then I sit down, you know, like the last week before the show with my Mac and I build the console file, and so I got a really solid starting point. I go into the rehearsal with almost no time sitting behind the console. My front of house setup goes really fast. And most of the guys that I work with are pretty amazed because they say, "Oh, the front of house guy usually just sits out there all day on the setup day and does, you know, just programs the console all day. It took you like 5 minutes."
Let's see you do that on this.
Well, yeah, that you got to. Well, that you know what you have to worry about on analog consoles, and I know that you're going to relate to this totally. Is, you know, if the guy didn't zero the console before you got it, then you're going to be pulling your hair out.
Yeah,
All
you
the
always
little
got to
switches, the pre-post switches, and all the knobs, and
always
oh
zero the
man,
best. Got to zero it.
oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
And
Don
you know,
Henley gave me a dirty look over a non-zeroed console.
I had to learn that lesson because when I started in this business, it was my console. And when I was doing band shit, it was my console. So I never zeroed it because I'm the last one that used it. And then when I started to do, you know, AV and corporate stuff, you know, I started to work with one or two other sound guys. And, you know, Gary was the first one that said, you know, "You're an asshole. You don't zero your consoles." I was like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, you know, I got your console and the frickin' tape was still on it." And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, man." And then I really realized that, you know, I got to get in this different mindset because I didn't own the console. So
Yeah.
good learning curve for me because that was like crazy.
I love
Kurt,
it.
hey Kurt, is that your escape raft up behind
Escape raft.
Oh,
in case there's flooding?
what happened is they shortened the pitch. They reduced the pitch of the roof, and when they did that, water would puddle up there because it wasn't steep enough to drain. So they, you know, we're right on the river, and they can take the band's river rafting. You know, so they have these river rafts. So they stuck 3 of them up there to
Oh, that's a good idea, though.
increase the
To
pitch back up to
catch
keep
the
it from
rain. Very
sinking.
good idea. Very good idea to catch the rain. Yeah.
So,
Anyway, so Gregory, just to go back to what you were asking in your question,
Yes, sir.
do you think that we've answered it correctly for you?
yeah, I hope we were able to help.
Yes, thank you. I definitely will preserve the atmosphere by not addressing this, and it's the race that I'm having is still making me happy for the fact that it is support tour. It's pretty good venues and it's a bus tour, so why not? And I love what Bruce said. I might end up doing more gigs with this person, and it's a good thing that we both learning each other's style, and he's learning from me. I'll probably learn something from him as well, because
Train them well.
I always have an open mind. And I love the perspective of, I'm not one of those guys who just say, okay, this is a control package that you need to get to me, deal with it. I like to be proactive and help. If I can get send one more email or make one more phone call and help the tour, why not?
But you know
So
what will happen on the next couple of tours that you do with him? You're going to find out that your job just got a lot easier because he knows what to expect from you. And you'll walk into a situation and he'll have one or two things all ready for you. And you'll be like, oh my God, this is great. And if you hadn't been in this position, you wouldn't have been able to do that. And you could really, this could be a really cool relationship. I mean,
Thank you for that perspective. I really love it. So I definitely going to take that
Also,
route.
remember to keep a list of your favorite catering items. Make sure it finds it his way.
And the worst case scenario, if it all goes south, you can just burn the whole thing to the ground by not making any phone calls whatsoever.
Just burn it all.
I also need my stuff to be delivered, and I need my control package. So I need to make sure that this is taken care of. I'm one of those guys who will make sure that I make and I double check other people's work if I have to make sure that, or remind someone, hey, did you make that phone call? Remember we talked about it? Oh yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. And have I not made those phone calls to remind people, I would be buried. So
yes.
I'm glad I'm
you're only helping yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that checklist that you create will save your ass in the long run. The checklist of what needs to be done, and it needs to be in writing, and that's for sure.
I just need to learn the balance, and that's why I was asking you guys how not to overstep other people's duties, because some people get territorial. This guy, luckily, is a very kind human being, and it's a pleasure working with him. But I can only assume in the future, if I do that, I might stumble upon people who will not like that, and I might get in trouble for that. So I'm trying to learn the balance here.
So let me tell you a short story. So my stories are never short. But so this year's MMAs was at the Joint in Las Vegas. And the Joint is a great venue. It seats a few thousand people, and it's a total, D&B rig. And we had a SL6XL at front of house. And when I went in for the meeting a month or so beforehand, I said to the guy in the theater, I said, so tell me about your crew. I said, your house engineer, is he a union guy that works only when there's shows, or does he work for the venue and he actually gives a shit about what happens? And he says he works for the venue and he gives a shit about what happens. I think you're going to like him. And I said, okay. So we got there the first day. We had 3 or 4 setup days before we got into rehearsals, right? He was a little cocky, and he was a little cocky, not too bad, a little cocky. And he kind of acted like, I like to do things my way, and I've done this show for so many years. I know what to expect. And we had a truck out in the we had a remote truck, and he did a lot of broadcasts, and he knew how he used to do it. But I have also done a shitload of these MMAs, and I know how we like to do it, And so, I would start to talk to him about stuff, and he would he just did not want to see the light really at all, right? So what I did over the next 24 hours, right, is a couple of times when I walked, and this doesn't have anything to do with anything that you and I are talking about directly, but it's just it's a state of mind almost, So I explained to him why I was doing things the way I was doing and dealing with the truck the way I was dealing with the truck, because I had worked with this truck engineer every year. I knew what he wanted. I knew why he wanted it. It was not the norm, but it was fine for us because we didn't have that much shit going on. And then I went and ran and got coffee, and I got him a coffee and a roll, and then that night I took him to dinner. And we went out to Summerlin to the barbecue place, right? And he was amazed when I asked him I said, listen, if you're not doing anything tonight, I'd love to take you to dinner because we have a lot of cool things to talk about because, he was pretty experienced and I was pretty experienced. So I went into it thinking that we were just going to compare notes and talk about shows, Well, we spent the next 3 or 4 hours at dinner together and we had a great time. And that flipped a switch. And you know what, man? That guy waited on me hand and foot for the next 5 days. And you know what? And I deal with all my crew. My wife always says, how do you go into a town with a crew of 5 or 8 that you don't know and you accomplish so much and get so much done and you end up doing a show? It's like, well, my first thing is how to deal with people is, if if they know you give a shit about them, they'll do anything for you. So the first thing I do is I sit them all down, I learn their names, and I ask them if they got kids, and I always ask them what car they drive because I'm a car guy and I want to know. Once we get past that, I hand out patch sheets. We talk about the rig and how we're going to do it, and then we build, right? But I always get and I always say it at the time, I say to a lot of the guys, it's like, I'm going to ask you for a cup of coffee or something once in a while because my hands are full, and don't think you're just sucking up to me because I do the same thing for you. And what I usually will do is during the course of the setup, I will specifically pick a moment and I'll say, listen, I'm going to run and get a coffee. Do you want anything? And I always buy them a coffee. And I'll tell you, sometimes the simplest little things gets you miles and miles. And taking that guy out to dinner, might have cost me $50 for his barbecue dinner. But you know what? The rest of my week was just easy. He was at my beck and call and helped me with every little stupid question of that console, because I'm a Yamaha guy, and he did everything I asked him and no more. Oh, that's dumb. Why are we doing this? I got a lot of that in the beginning, and that was, all that changed after dinner that night.
There you go. And fortunately, that was a quick story from Bruce. Could you imagine if he did the long version?
Yeah. Now, let me tell you. No.
Long version is what happened after dinner. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, he forgot to tell us what color shirt and pants he was wearing during this meal. But it's all right,
Yeah, he turned out to be a really great guy. We had a good time. So, use all these moments to your advantage and just know that, it's going to pay off in the end. It's going to make your life easier one way or the other.
Kindness, always.
Gregory,
kindness.
just let me give you this bit of fatherly advice.
Don't
Shit
burn
rolls
bridges.
downhill.
Shit rolls downhill.
Shit rolls downhill.
And never burn a bridge because you never know who you're going to be working for next.
And if you want it done right, do it yourself. That's all I have to say. If you want it done right, do it yourself.
When I worked for an AV company, Wayne and I were like, sound guys at this very large AV company. And, when I first started working there, I was one of the only sound guys. And a lot of the guys, I don't know, some of the older guys, well, Jan, you might remember AVHQ when they had special services. I was the sound guy for special services. And I went to the Christmas party and I went to the summer party, and the crew in special services said, why are you going to these parties with like 200 hotel guys, AV guys at these parties? We don't have anything to do with those guys. I says, because we all work for the same company and you never know. You just never know, right? So I would go to these parties and, and hang out and help. And I used to help the guys. I used to tell them when I was in their hotels doing something in their ballroom, we would do it all completely and leave them out of it, of course. And I would always tell them, if you have any questions about anything, I'd always bring them in the ballroom later and show them around and talk to them about what I was doing and if they had any questions. And then in the end, when they dissipated our department and Wayne and I started freelancing, all of a sudden, all these hotel guys were like directors at these AV companies, and they were the ones hiring us. And over and over again, I would make a call and they'd say, oh, Bruce, right. Do you remember me? I know you. You took good care of me. I was having a problem and you advised me or I helped him get through something. And he says, man, you got a gig, man. We'll hire you in a minute. And I ran into that with Elford Media and I ran into that with Videocam and Wayne too. We constructed bridges all over the place so that we would keep working, and it was pretty amazing.
There you go. Another way to shorten that story is, just remember this. You're going to meet the same people going up the ladder as you are going down the ladder.
Wayne and
just remember that.
I used to get these questions from the hotel guys when I was in the hotel.
One second, Bruce. I got to stop you because Kurt's saying something.
I got it split.
Oh, you got to go?
Very good.
I love your hat. I want one of your hats.
All right.
The gamble hat.
You got my email? Send me a message. I'll I'll get you on.
Yeah, if it's $20 or something, Lloyd, I'll pay for it.
Very
No
good.
big
That's
deal.
just about the price of hats these days
Yeah,
for the
it is.
Ended
manufacturer.
up
See
an
you guys.
order two.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
See you, Kurt.
I'll tell you what. With that in
Sure,
mind,
Kurt.
let's just say goodbye to the listening audience. We're gonna stay in the room. We're gonna talk more. We've got some things. A couple of people didn't say anything. Ken Porter didn't say anything. Chris, you didn't say anything. Chris, you got anything you want to say? Nope. Today you're playing mute.
I'm
Good. Ken
sorry I
Porter,
was late,
you.
but
Hi,
I'm
Chris.
here now.
The only one that I was going to say earlier is that never dump on the opening act because you may need them for your life, for your
Yes.
income in the future.
Oh, yes. Never. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and it amazes me how many times the opening act sounds like ass. And it's like, dude, you can do better than this. You don't just shaft the opening act because it's the opening act, you know?
I saw that happen
I've seen that
at
so
a
many times.
Rolling Stones concert. Living Color was the first band to come on, and they didn't give them subwoofers.
Really?
Oh, either that or, they forgot. But yeah, like the sound was just really not there. And then
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses came on, boom, full audio. So yeah,
And where did you see that tour at the LA Coliseum?
I did.
Yeah, I saw that show. I don't know. I was right down on the field, about equal distant to front of house, and it sounded pretty good down there.
Yeah, I was a little bit further back. I still had very good seats, but that was an amazing show. What it was, Living Color, Guns N' Roses. Wasn't there
And the
another
Stones.
act? And then the Stones.
Subwoofer
I can't
seems to be
remember.
the way they get people, because I went to a 38 Special concert at the LA Fairgrounds, and the opening act, they didn't have the subwoofers on, and it sounded like a bad pair of tweeters, And then,
Oh, yeah,
of course, there's a 15-minute stage change, and then 38 Special comes on with their hit tunes and blows me over, and I'm like, oh, this is great, It's like, what happened to the opening band? It's there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, way back in like 1978, 79, the band I was with, we were up in Idaho, and we opened 2 shows for Head East. And they had the DBX 160 on the system output. And our first show, that guy cranked that compressor way back. And I couldn't get any gain. I was like, what the hell's going on here? And
he was compressing
so
you. Yeah.
I learned by the second show, I watched what he did. And second show, I didn't have that problem. I was able to put it back to where I needed it to be.
So one of the things that Wayne and I used to do when we worked at the AV company is I realized that a lot of the hotel guys, they're all like these up and coming techs, and they're taught by people who don't know anything besides. So, they're just in this terrible circle of cluelessness, they know enough to be dangerous. So I used to tell the guys, if you have questions, ask me, send me an email. So Wayne and I started this thing called the discerning ear. And once a month, we would take questions from the hotel guys and answer them, right? So we would, like they'd say, well, a balanced circuit and an RCA versus an XLR. How can you go down a really long snake with an XLR, but you can't adapt an RCA to an XLR without a transformer and go down the snake and not pick up noise? Well, we would explain how that works, and I'll tell you, from the discerning ear, we made more relationships. Because once we were on our own, all these people knew who we were, So we never missed a beat.
Which is really interesting, because I answered every type of question like that with either magic or pixie dust.
Pixie dust, yeah.
It's one of those, right?
What's crazy now, though, to be honest, I was even kind of chatting with Greg on this, was, the number of people with specific knowledge now required to put together a show, right? You got to have,
oh my God,
a front of house engineer. You've got to have a monitor engineer. You got to have an RF engineer.
So you know what? A tour used to go out with 3 guys. Now there's 6. There's a networking engineer.
There you go.
The RF guy is usually the comm guy too, because it's digital comm and it's RF coordination, and it's networking because all these rigs are networked together. And I've seen this where there's a front of house guy and a front of house assistant and a monitor guy and a monitor assistant. And it used to be, when I went out, there was 3 of us and the local guys,
You forgot system engineer and you forgot space bar jockey.
That's right. Systems engineer. Can't live without that guy,
Oh
man.
yeah, no,
Oh
it's
my.
written there. You got the guy who's actually like gonna work the DSP and who did all the wiring on the arrays and knows what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, that's your systems engineer,
Got the room to make sure the
Right.
angles were correct and was pointed at the people and not at the wall.
Yeah. Well, there is
But
that.
just think about this: how much money you're saving these days because you don't have to have a drug dealer with you anymore.
Oh my
You know?
God. Yeah, yeah.
The good old days, Jan, huh?
So I have a question for you guys that own these big rigs, and Ken, how much does your front of house engineer? Does he design the system for the show? Does he assist in putting it up, or is he just like build front of house? Do it? Does he even tune it? Because I know a lot of systems engineers does all the tuning. Because Wayne and I do everything from start to finish.
The system engineer and the front of house engineer are a symbiotic relationship. If you don't have a good relationship, they don't work together, fighting each other.
Oh, yes.
You have almost that ESP to decide, oh,
100%.
look at that before he puts there. Usually the house engineer has to have trust in the system engineer, because if the manager walks up and says, I got complaints from people over there, how come you didn't do that? And he just looks over there and the system engineer goes, takes care of it, covers his back, there, it gets to where that's the thing. So he actually, the system engineer faithfully reproduces the mix to every seat in the house, and that's his job, is to make sure it's covered right.
The system is covered.
Yeah.
So many venues are slightly different. So if you're going out with 100 boxes, and it's like 20 per side, left and right, and then wing fills and maybe some delays or, whatever. So the venues change in size and change in width and stuff like that. Who decides how many boxes are going to hang for front of house? The systems engineer?
And the other one too, the system engineer has to get first thing in the morning, find out where they sold to too, because a lot of times they'll hit and they'll need to give you we only got 180 coverage today, or we got around, else we've opened up this in the upper deck on this side, and you got to point something that direction.
So it is really the systems engineer.
That's
interesting.
Ken, is it the systems engineer that runs the DSP then and is handling all of the?
Yep, the rig, that's the time and tuning of the rig, and the front of house engineer just oversees and makes his opinion. They usually ask each other what they okay with this, and if you work them enough, it's like automatic.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, because I heard a story about somebody who stuck a equalizer into the signal chain after the DSP and ended up smoking some voice coils.
Wow.
Because there's no control, right? If you stick that thing in after the DSP, then the DSP is unaware that you're.
Well, nowadays the DSP becomes the multi-act, the opening act and stuff. Their point of entry, they each have separate EQs and stuff. They can each put an EQ on it. But a lot of systems now with like DMB and L acoustics, you have every amp channel is DSP driven, and got the limiters are into DSP now. So
that's the way Meyer does the Galaxy, Galileo thing.
Yeah, which I think is great. Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome.
I mean, I'm usually doing all the tuning off the console delays and the console EQs and stuff, but on a really big rig, being able to do it on a Galaxy or JBL has Performance Manager now, but I don't use Performance Manager nearly to its capabilities, because I'm just so used to putting boxes up in the room and just doing it on the console,
I think it would be quite interesting to do the Natali curve on a DSP and see what happened, as an experiment, not like.
Yeah. Well, there's a big difference between throwing up a corporate one-off in AV than living with the same rig every day for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, imagine. I lived with the same rig for 2 days.
For months, doing the same thing every day with the same rig. Yeah, you
up and down and up and down and up and down.
Well, it also depends on whether you're in all arenas or you're on sheds. You got to make sure that you don't have, if you're stuck in a theater, and next day you're in an outdoor amphitheater and you do a stadium date come up the next weekend, you got to kind of plan for that if you can.
You bet.
Yeah, all of my rigs are like, I start planning a couple of weeks out and design the whole thing and argue with the budgeting people and the salespeople that I need more boxes because they rent stuff by the box.
Well,
And it's like, well, what do you mean? I budgeted 20. I says, well, it's going to take 30.
the biggest
So
problem with corporate things a lot of times and one-off shows is that people just show up and think, oh, I've got 2 days for load in, and I can build the system there. And like I mean, I've seen LED walls come in in cases in one box at
yep,
one
all the time that happens, all the time.
and it's forever and nothing's pre-prepped, nothing's
Yep.
going together.
And we're standing around waiting for the stage to go in because I got to put the front fills and the subs in and time everything.
Well, I've had PA up in an arena run a corporate, and they said, "How come you're up and the lighting and video is still on the ground?" I said, "They didn't prep anything. They didn't even do bundles in the
Yeah.
shop presses or anything like that."
Bruce, wasn't it you that was at like a Boeing thing and you didn't have the lift pins and you're like, wait a minute, the Boeing makes these. Wasn't that you or who was that?
Yeah, I think it was. It was the pins to the pins that hung the subwoofers.
Yeah. So
It was like we
have
couldn't
the
hang any of the
lift pins.
subwoofers because they
we're
didn't
at
send any of the
Boeing.
pins.
They make 'em.
It's like I woke somebody up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I says, man, I don't know what you're thinking, man, but I can't hang my subwoofers and all these union guys are costing me a bloody fortune. I says, you better get in your goddamn car and bring me some pins.
Well, it might have been your fault that exit door fell off the plane because they needed the pins and you took them. And with
Oh,
that in
man.
mind,
Yes.
we're going to say goodbye to everybody that's been watching us because we've been on a little bit too long. And I want to thank you all for watching. I never thought in a million years that this would be so informative that people would actually learn something. So what do you know? I've been wrong before. There you have it. The last thing I'm going to say is remember, you make it happen. So make sure that everything you heard today is an opinion. You know it. You do your own research. Take care. Be safe, and we'll see you again next week, same time, same place. And until then, make it happen. And we'll talk to you again next week. Bye now, everybody. We're going to stay in the room, so don't go away.